Hello everybody, this is the training of employees in fire protection prepared by Dr. Nedzad Hadziefendic, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. Now let's see first some medical aspects of human behavior in buildings affected by fire. The first one, brain dysfunction in a building affected by fire is directly related to body temperature, which increases with an increase of the temperature in the building. Problems in the brain functioning are primarily related to the toxic effects of chemicals from the smoke which a victim inhales: hydrocyanic acid, hydrochloric acid, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. The fire victims have a feeling that will produce less and less oxygen flow to the brain and will eventually cause an enormous secretion of adrenaline. A mortally endangered person is fully aware but is behaving strangely. Now, let's see something about the physical weakness of people in fires. Incapacitation. Incapacitation is a term referring to the combined action of several toxins from fire smoke that paralyze the victim. It is characterized by the physical weakness of the victim. It is considered to be at the top of the list of toxins that synergistically act on hydrogen cyanide. Furthermore, it is characterized by the presence of consciousness and the absolute inability to move the victim. Now, let's see some reasons for the occurrence of incapacitation. First of all, escape routes being filled with smoke, then high temperatures in the corridor on the way to evacuation, the building height the victim is located at, a sudden increase in strong irritants in fire smoke, panic, disorientation, catatonic syndrome, current behavioral disorder, locking, entering the bathtub filled with water, closing oneself in closets, jumping off the terrace. All those who are victims of incapacitation cannot save themselves. A piece of advice such as "people, run away, you will die," will not give results because the victims cannot move. Now, let's see something about catatonia, catatonic syndrome of people in the building on fire. Catatonia or catatonic syndrome is a mental disorder which manifests itself mainly as a disorder of motor activities. This syndrome is a consequence of psychosis as a result of poisoning by combustion products. There are two alternating phases in catatonia: stupor and frenzy. The stupor phase. In catatonic stupor, skeletal muscle stiffness increases to the point where the victim remains blocked in any position. The facial expression is frozen and the victim remains completely silent and does not communicate. The victim does not react to emergency circumstances, for example, fire. Any attempt to change the position of a person in deep stupor will cause additional resistance of skeletal muscles. Now, let's see something about the frenzy phase. The victims of this phase of catatonia behave foolishly, talk nonsense, sing, speak loudly or shout, attack everybody around them impulsively, frantically, and aggressively. Catatonian fires is treated by grabbing the victims by the arms and legs and dragging them to a safe place. At least 2 rescuers are required to block the arms and legs of a victim who acts aggressively and attacks the rescuers. People who had catatonic syndrome and survived the fire thanks to the intervention of firefighters and rescuers saw firefighters as the devil coming for them. Due to this reason, the victims of the catatonic syndrome offered significant resistance to the rescue operations of the firefighters. Now, let's see the conclusion. The behavior of people in the building affected by the fire, particularly in the case of tall buildings, is accompanied by strange behavior as a result of incapacitation, physical weakness of the victim, and the catatonic syndrome, the phases of stupor and frenzy of the victim caught in the fire. Now, let's see something about the legislation in the Republic of Serbia. We've got the Fire Protection Act, the regulations in the field of fire protection, standards in the field of fire protection, regulations, and finally, technical recommendations. Now, fire protection can be defined as a set of measures and actions of normative, organizational, technical, preventive, educational, and informative educational nature. Fire protection in the Republic of Serbia is governed by the Fire Protection Act, which came into force on the 7th of October 2010, with significant amendments from 2015 and 2018. The principles of fire protection are the following: the principle of protection, the principle of prevention, the principle of permanence, the principle of strengthening consciousness, the principle of publicity, the principle of cooperation, the principle of solidarity, the principle of responsibility. Implementation of preventive fire protection measures is the obligation of all employees. Now, let's see something about fire hazard categories. According to the Fire Protection Act, facilities, activities and land are classified into the following categories according to the fire hazard. Number 1, with a high risk of fire, the first category. Number 2, with increased risk of fire, which is the second category. And finally, number 3, with a certain risk of fire, which belongs to the third category. What are the legal obligations of companies regarding fire protection? Let's see an excerpt from the Fire Protection Act, Article 24, Paragraph 1. The owner or user of the facility or land and the company or other legal entity classified as the first category of fire risk is obliged to provide a technically equipped and trained fire brigade with a required number of firefighters. Examples: Pančevo oil refinery, Nikola Tesla airport, ammunition factories. Another excerpt from the Fire Protection Act, Article 24, Paragraph 2. A company or other legal entity classified as the second category of fire risk is obliged to organize the implementation of preventive fire protection measures and a permanent tour of duty. There must be a department with the required number of persons professionally qualified to implement fire protection measures. Examples: technical schools, buildings, the shopping mall, Ušće industrial plants. Finally, the third excerpt from the Fire Protection Act, Article 24, Paragraph 3. A company or other legal entity classified as the third category of fire risk is obliged to organize the implementation of preventive fire protection measures with a required number of persons professionally qualified to implement fire protection measures. Examples: restaurants, markets, craft workshops. According to Fire Protection Plan, Article 27, the entities grouped in the first and second category of fire risk are obliged to adopt a fire protection plan, which contains in particular the outline of the existing fire protection state, fire risk assessment, the organization of fire protection, a proposal of technical and organizational measures for elimination of deficiencies and improvement of fire protection, the calculation of the budget of necessary financial resources, and prescribed budget and graphic attachments. Fire Protection Rules, Article 28. All companies classified in the third category are required to adopt a General Act on the Fire Protection Rules with an evacuation plan which includes the organization of technological processes to eliminate the risk of fire outbreaks and spread, fire protection with a required number of persons to perform fire protection activities, the adoption of the evacuation plan and instructions for acting in the event of fire, the methods of training employees for the implementation of fire protection measures. So we see the evacuation plan, evacuations from home, evacuations from work, from public buildings, etc. But you should remember, it is strictly forbidden to place and put aside flammable material on evacuation routes, on fire and common staircases, on corridors, passages, exits. And let's remember, hell in Brazil, at least 245 dead in a disco fire in 2013. Evacuation from the building of technical schools. So, first of all, we've got the basic employee training. The basic training in the field of fire protection is organized for all employees, no later than 30 days from beginning of the job. The basic training program is adopted by the employer or the head of the state body, the body of the autonomous province or the body of the local self-government unit, with the obtained consent of the ministry. The employee's knowledge is tested once in the period of every 3 years. Article 54. So, attending the basic training is mandatory. According to Article 54, employees are obliged to attend training and testing of knowledge in the field of fire protection and to adhere to the prescribed instructions, warnings, prohibitions, fire protection measures, as well as to start extinguishing fires in the event of fire. Failure to attend training without justification constitutes a serious breach of duty and entails disciplinary liability of the employee. Now, let's see something about storage of flammable material. According to Article 48, flammable material must not be stored in an area not less than 6 meters from the building or part of the building, unless otherwise specified by technical regulations. Now, let's see something about penal provisions of the law. Misdemeanor of a legal entity entails 500,000 to 3 million dinars should the entity does not hang up the evacuation plan in a visible place, does not keep the mounted installations in the building in good condition, and does not periodically control them, does not organize fire protection, for example, welding works in temporary places, harvest works, sports events. If the legal entity does not organize the basic training of employees within the prescribed period, if a person engaged for the implementation of preventive fire protection measures in the building has not passed the professional exam, if the legal entity does not install automatic fire alarm devices and/or automatic fire extinguishing systems, if this is stipulated by the law. Now, let's see offences of a natural person from 10,000 to 50,000 dinars if they make an open fire in the woods or at a distance of less than 200 meters from the edge of the forest, store flammable material at a distance of less than 6 meters from the object, falsely report a fire, set obstacles, disposes of material on evacuation routes. Criminal offences against causing general danger. In case that the crime was committed unintentionally out of negligence, a milder sentence is envisaged, up to 3 years in prison or up to 5 years in case of severe bodily injuries or great property damage, and up to 8 years in case of causing death. Criminal offences against causing general danger. If someone knows that there is fire or some other danger to life or body of people or large property and does not report it to the competent authority or does not take measures to eliminate this danger, although they could have done so without danger to themselves and other people, can be sentenced to a fine or spending up to 2 years in prison. If someone prevents another from taking these measures, they can be sentenced up to 5 years in prison. The conclusion: any irresponsible behavior of a responsible person in the legal sense, for example, a director or dean, the person in charge of implementing preventive fire protection measures, and each of the employees is a serious violation of work obligations and is prevented by criminal provisions of the Fire Protection Act and the Criminal Code of the Republic of Serbia. Now, let's see some basic conditions for causing and stopping the burning process, physical, chemical processes of combustion. First of all, fire. It is defined as an uncontrolled violent reaction of combining oxygen and flammable substances under the influence of an increased temperature. We've got this formula: flammable substance plus oxygen plus high temperature equals combustion. So without any of these elements, we haven't got combustion. So if we've got this flammable material plus oxygen, but without increased temperature, there is no combustion. And also, in this case, now, what about self-combustion, or the so-called spontaneous combustion? Ignition of matter without the presence of an external heat source due to self-heating caused by chemical, physical, or biological processes is called self-combustion. Many substances are subject to these processes, such as lignite, coal, sawdust, grease, and various types of oil, fine powder, or certain metals, in the presence of moisture or oil, core, cotton, or linen cloth soaked in oil or fat, hay, etc. The most common cases are the self-combustion of hay, then lignite, as well as various textile waste soaked in oil. The process of self-combustion for different substances takes different time. While with linseed oil, it lasts only a few hours. With oil cakes, it lasts a few days, while with hay, it lasts for weeks, or with coal for months. Here we've got an example of greased cotton wool or linen cloths should always be placed in metal containers with lids. Combustion of certain types of flammable materials. Solid flammable substances burn with a flame with more or less embers. Liquid flammable substances burn with a flame without embers, and gaseous flammable substances burn with a flame when they are released in a controlled manner, and when they are in a closed space in a certain concentration with air, they burn by an explosion. Now, fire classification according to the flammable substance, according to size, according to the stages of development, and finally according to the place of origin. Class A, fires caused by solid flammable substances, wood, coal, textiles, plastics, electrical installations. Class B, fires of liquid flammable substances, petrol, paints, varnishes, acetone. Class C, fires of gaseous flammable substances, propane, butane, acetylene, natural gas, hydrogen. Class D, fires of flammable metals, aluminium, magnesium, and their alloys. And Class F, fires caused by fats and oils. Now, classification of fires according to their size. We've got small fires, medium fires, large fires, and finally, disastrous fires. And finally, classification of fires according to development phases. The first phase is the initial phase, the second, the phase of bursting into flame, and finally, the third phase of live incineration phase. With a fire extinguisher or a handy tool, we can only extinguish fire in the initial phase of its development, the duration of which depends on the type of fuel material, mostly a few minutes. So, as you can see, some examples of fire development phases. And we've got fire classification according to place of origin, which is broken into internal fires and external fires. Let's remember Great Forest Fire back in 2017, venue Portugal, 62 victims in burned cars. But we've got some fire extinguishing methods. First of all, cooling, the process of lowering the combustion temperature below the flash point of combustible matter. Choking insulation, the process of preventing the inflow of oxygen into the combustion process below the percentage of oxygen required to carry out this process. And anti-catalytic action, the process of slowing down the chemical reaction, which is reflected in a combination of combustible matter and oxygen oxidation until the moment when this reaction stops and thus the combustion process stops. Extinguishing media. They can be defined as substances that are introduced into the combustion process and have the ability to remove at least one of the conditions necessary for combustion, thereby stopping the combustion process. The classification of extinguishing media can be done according to two parameters. First of all, according to state of aggregation, and the second, according to the mode of operation. According to state of aggregation, we've got solid, sand, earth, dust, liquid, water, foam, gaseous, carbon dioxide, halon, inogen, hexafluoropropane, and according to the mode of operation, suffocating agents, coolants, anti-catalytic agents. Fire extinguishing media, so we've got medium type of extinguishing and class of fire. So we've got water, cooling, class of fire A, dust, sodium carbonate, anti-catalytic A, B, C, D, F. Then we've got CO2, suffocating ABCF, halon, inogen, Fe36, anti-catalytic ABC, and foam insulation, class B. What about handy tools? We've got blankets, earth, dry sand, shovel, and snow. Wall hydrants. First of all, 6 months control of flow and pressure. Directions for use. Remove the seal from the door. Open the locker door. Connect the fire hose to the nozzle. Accept the nozzle. Unscrew the valve wheel to the left. Direct the jet of water into the fire direction. Turn the valve wheel to the right all the way to the end. A hand-mounted powder fire extinguisher. This is an L type and it undergoes 6-month inspection S6, S9. Now we've got hand-mounted powder fire extinguishers, new type under constant pressure. And hand and trolley for fire extinguishing with carbon dioxide. Initial fire extinguishing Fe36 hexafluoropropane. FE36 is ideal for use in portable fire extinguishers, for use in computing centers, telecommunications, equipment control rooms, museums, archives, etc. It does not leave trace of fire extinguishing, echo gas, non-toxic. Conclusion. All employees should be familiar with fire extinguishers in their environment, at home and or at work. The most important thing to prevent a fire is to eliminate the heat source. A heater, a cigarette butt, a stove, fault in electrical installations, etc., because oxygen and fuel cannot be eliminated. Now, let's see some common causes of fire. Unquenched cigarette butts, the use of metal waste bins is recommended. Inserting wires in fuses, replace the blown inserted wires with original ones of the same rated current. Use of heaters, avoid the use of quartz heaters and electric stoves when there is flammable material near them, etc. The use of heaters is strictly forbidden by the Internal Act of the company. Indoor gas leaks. Regularly check the gas supply and distribution systems. For example, rub a bar of soap over the hose connection points on the valves and check for bubbles. Dangers of welding in temporary places. Danger of extinguishing electrical installations with water. Fire extinguishing in the office space. You should use dry powder for extinguishing, and remember this well. Now, fire extinguishing on live electrical installations. You are supposed to use carbon dioxide gas for extinguishing. Extinguishing expensive electronic equipment in indoor space, inogenic or hexafluoropropane. Extinguishing fire on a car, an extinguisher with powder S1, S2, aerosol mag generator. Now, let's see some causes of fire in cars. Rechargeable battery, electrical installation and devices, fuel supply system, engine and other parts, exhaust manifold, brakes, etc. We propose a recommendation. The trunk of the vehicle must save an S1A or 2A constant pressure powder appliance and a protective glove for lifting the hot hood. Automatic alarm and fire extinguishing. Large business premises, public buildings, industrial plants, etc. must have systems for the first fire alarm, a fire control panel, fire detectors, manual and automatic. So we see a fire control panel, an automatic fire detector and a manual fire alarm. In addition to this, we've got the manual fire detector. So manual fire detectors are installed on evacuation routes. Stable automatic fire extinguishing systems are set up in places where expensive equipment is installed, where there is not an all-day tour of duty, in places where it is difficult to evacuate a large number of people, or when access to fire brigades is difficult or their stations are quite far from the facility. In the event of fire, try to contact the fire department as soon as possible by calling the number 112. So do not panic while you report the following: the exact fire location, fire, street and building number, what is burning, if there are persons whose health is endangered, your personal data, name, surname and telephone number from which you are calling. Useful information and tips on how to behave in the event of fire. In accordance with the law on protection of the population from exposure to tobacco smoke, the Official Gazette of Republic of Serbia 30/2010, smoking is prohibited in all workplaces. So smoking ban in connection with fire prevention. Useful information and tips. Carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas formed as a result of incomplete combustion. It is lighter than air and fills the upper layer of the room first. It is recommended that you should have at hand an initial fire extinguisher which you know how to use in your apartment. In order to provide safe evacuation, corridors and fire escapes should be kept open and passable at all times. Prepare hydrants, set up initial fire extinguishers, and learn how to handle them. Checking the functionality of anti-panic lighting and hydrant cabinets is extremely important. Be careful with stoves and irons, dispose of them only when they have cooled down. Fires often occur in basements. Don't panic. You will be safe if you stay in your homes. Put pieces of wet cloth on the edges of the door and open the windows. You can go out on the terrace and wait for the rescue of firefighters. The most endangered room in the apartment is, as a rule, the kitchen hood and electric stove. When leaving the room, do not leave on high-power electrical appliances which are occasionally used, such as stove, boiler, heater, iron. If you stay out of the apartment for a long time, unplug all electrical appliances except a refrigerator. Do not leave heaters and TA stoves switched on even when you leave the apartment for a short time, and keep them at least 1 meter away from other flammable objects. If you notice heating of electrical power cords and cables, switches or devices, do not use them and be sure to call an electrician. Clean the kitchen hood regularly because the grease in the filter can easily self-ignite. Make sure that there are no curtains, kitchen towels or other fabrics above or near the stove. Keep sprays for cleaning, deodorants, varnishes, etc. away from heat sources. Be very careful with propane butane cylinders. If you smell gas, do not switch electrical appliances on or off. Sparks can cause an explosion, remember that. What to do when you notice a fire? Assess the situation, and if you think it is still possible, begin with initial fire extinguishing by using an initial fire extinguisher. If the fire is not in the initial, but in the blazing phase, start evacuation from the building caught in flames. Follow the elaborated evacuation plan. If there are activated handheld fire alarms, alert other household members and your neighbors, employees of the company, by shouting loudly, "Fire!" Run in a bent or crawling position, since smoke and toxic gases are located near the ceiling. Put a piece of wet cloth on your mouth or nose. Close all the doors behind you. Never return to the apartment to save property and animals. Firefighters are specially trained and have the equipment to enter an area filled with smoke. But remember, in the event of fire in high-rise buildings, passenger elevators must not be used for rescue. Now, let's see something about emergency lighting. In the event of fire, emergency lighting has the following function. When the main power supply is cut on the premises, it eliminates spreading panic among people and directs all occupants how to evacuate the premises safely. Note, every 6 months a control test of the correct operation of emergency lighting is performed. How to extinguish a burning person. Let's see something about extinguishing procedure. A person whose clothes caught fire should be approached from the back. Knock them down to the ground so that the flames and smoke do not go towards the head. Extinguish the fire by preventing the inflow of oxygen, starting from the head downwards by covering the inflamed person with a coat, blanket or similar material. Take care to allow the person to breathe. If clothing or blankets stick to the body due to fire and burns, do not remove them by force. So, a common cause of fire, electrical installation. Faults in electrical installations are the cause of a large number of fires. Old, poorly maintained, damaged or unprofessionally wired electrical installations are a common culprit for disastrous fires. Statistics says that 30% of the total number of fires in the developed countries are caused by faults in electrical installations. About 25% of the total material damage occurs in fires caused by faults in electrical installations. And what does the law say? All installations must be maintained in good condition and inspected periodically. Periodic inspections and tests of electrical installations must be performed at time intervals determined by the regulations on technical standards for low-voltage installations. The envisaged fines for legal entities that do not maintain electrical installations in good condition are from 300,000 to 1 million dinars. Now, percentage distribution of fire caused by failure on electrical installations according to the place of fault. We've got fault location and percentage. Conductors surface mounted in the building, 35%. Cables and plugs, 18%. Light fixtures, 13%. Switches, extension cords and sockets, 12%. Light sources, 9%. Fuses, main switches, distribution boards, 6%. The statistical data on the causes of fires in electrical installations for the city of Belgrade. So we've got this statistical survey according to years, according to electrical appliances and devices. So causes of origin, short circuit, overload, electric arc, poor electric contact and atmospheric discharge. And you see these numbers: 2015, 301, 468, 2016, 282, 498, 4, and so on. The most dangerous faults are series electric arc and poor electrical contact. Now, an example of the process of forming electric arc at the point of breaking a copper conductor. This is a microscopic image, and we've got thermal damage to the PVC insulation at the connection of the grounded socket outlet in which a poor electrical contact occurred. Examples of damaged electrical components due to a poor electrical contact detected by hearing, smell, and sight. Now, another important ingredient which might help us is thermal imaging of electric installation, which is a reliable method for detecting hotspots on poor contacts. A very common consequence of hotspots which cannot be detected actually. Examples of thermovision detections of hotspots: the hotspot on one of the active phase clamps, overheating of contacts on the cam switch, thermal imaging of the switchboard for powering an electric boiler, hotspot on the electromagnetic contactor. Now, thermal imaging of worn-out contactors in the ventilation distribution cabinet in a thermal substation. An example of choke overheating: electromagnetic light fixture choke with fluorescent light sources. The maximum permissible operating temperature is 75 degrees Celsius. An example of detecting a fuse with a fuse link in which overheating has occurred due to a poor contact. And now, one great issue is that in the Republic of Serbia, a large number of low-quality electrical components is found on the market, for example, non-certified extension cords of Chinese and Turkish manufacture. An extension cord without a protective conductor, so you see. The conclusion: sooner or later, every extension cord purchased on the market or flea market will cause fire. Inserting wires and fuses, current overload, current hot lines. A bundle of cables increases the probability of mechanical damage to the conductor and its overheating due to difficult heat dissipation. Now, possible causes of fire: extending the cables, cable insulation damage, electricians amateurs, and cause of fire in one residential building in Belgrade was particularly electric fault in the measuring distribution board caused by inserting wires and fuses. The conclusion: fires caused by failure in electrical installations encompass as much as 30% of the total number of fires. The two most critical types of failure are overheating of poor electrical contact and series electric arc. The purpose of fire protection, finally, is protection of people's lives and protection of material goods. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you all for your attention. And the date of the next training is June 2024. Questions and additional inquiries and info can be addressed to Nedzad, so Nedzad at etf.rs. Thank you all.